Hello and welcome to Bible Quest. We are on a journey seeking for the truth of God. We believe that His Word has revealed His truth, and so we are going through His Word looking for evidence of this truth. And we're also accepting that not everyone believes that His Word is truth. If you have questions or comments you'd like to send us, please go to BibleQuest.org. You can also find our other podcasts there on YouTube through that BibleQuest.org channel. But please send us a line, send us a question or comment you may have of something you've seen on this channel. Or as we're examining tonight and several other lessons, we'll be looking at our supposed Bible contradictions. If you think you've found a contradiction, we'd like to examine that as well. If the Bible is truth as we claim, there will be no contradictions. And so if there's even just one, then we can throw out the Bible. It's not from God. So that's what we're aiming to do. We want to know the truth, and we are on a quest to find that. We're glad you've joined us for that, and we're encouraged by that. Want to welcome our other panelists, Drew and Ken. How are you guys doing this evening?
Doing great. How about you?
Doing great. Doing great. Always good to be together with you guys. Good to hear that you're well also, Ken. So we've been looking at some contradictions. We'll continue doing a few of these, God willing. But tonight, Drew, I think you've got something interesting you wanted to bring before us. What have you got for us?
Yeah, I've heard someone bring this up before. There's so-called contradiction. I want to read something in Acts chapter 9, verse 7. And if you're familiar with this, I'm sure you are familiar with this. This is where Paul, his name was Saul of Tarsus at the time. He's on his way down to Damascus to arrest people who were believing followers of Christ. And so he's on his way down there. I just want to read one verse because what we know the story where he's going down there. He has a vision that Jesus appears to him in a bright light, and he speaks to Saul, tells him what he's got to do, go down to Damascus. But there's a particular verse in there in Acts chapter 9 that makes a statement about what Paul was, what the voice was speaking. And there's a so-called contradiction because I think there's three recording of events of this where the event is recorded. Once in Acts 9, once in Acts 22. I think you said there's another one in Acts 26 of the same event. Let me read the one in Acts 9 first. And the men that journeyed with him, that would be with Paul, stood speechless, hearing the voice, but beholding no man. And then in Acts chapter 22, talking about the same event, and they that were with me beheld indeed, this is Acts 22, verse 9, and they that were, Paul recounting the event, and they that were with me beheld indeed the light, but they heard not the voice of him that spake to me. Well, wait a minute. Verse 7 of Acts 9, verse 7 says, they heard the voice, but they didn't see anybody. They didn't behold the man that was talking. And then in Acts 22, verse 9, it says they didn't hear the voice that spoke. So what's going on here? Well, what often happens, is that we read more into the text that actually states what's going on. In doing so, we create an apparent contradictions. Two things happened. Interrupt me anytime you want. And if you have another verse that you wanted to share with me, go right ahead. But two things happened. There was a bright light, and there was a voice. The voice spoke to Saul. The men who were with them, they saw the light. But another thing that happened, Saul was blinded. He saw the light. They all saw the light, but only Paul was blinded when he saw the light. The men heard the voice, but they didn't understand what was being said. That word heard is akuo, I think, in Greek. It's being used in Acts 9:7 in the sense of hearing a sound, and that's what it says, verse 7. I'm not even sharing my slides, but it's up there. The men that journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing the voice, and that's what's being said there. They heard the sound. It's used in other passages, by the way, in a similar way. Matthew 24:31, 1 Thessalonians, but I'm not going to go there, but it's used in the same way that they heard something. They heard the sound. Now, in Acts 22, though, it's being used in the sense of understanding the meaning of the voice. I'll give you an example. Husbands do the same thing. You know, your wife will call you from the kitchen and you'll reply, "I can't hear you." Well, technically you did hear her. Otherwise you wouldn't have answered her saying, "I can't hear it." But what you're saying is, well, the words are not distinct enough for you to understand what she's saying. That's the same thing here. They heard the voice, but they didn't understand it. And this isn't the only time that such a thing happens. Jesus once said, "Father, glorify your name." And then a voice from heaven said, "I have both glorified it and will glorify it again." Therefore, the people that were standing by, they heard it and they said, "Oh, there was thunder." And others said, "No, an angel has spoken to him." This is in John chapter 12. I'm sorry I didn't bring that verse up. It's the same. It's the same event. Some they thought heard thunder, and others thought they heard an angel speaking. Same thing. In other words, some only heard a noise, some heard the voice. There's no contradiction there, but that's what's going on. The fact that the men that were with Saul saw the light and heard the voice without understanding it, that's important on another note, because it relays to us that Saul wasn't just making up the story about a visitation from Jesus. Even though, through the conversation between Jesus and Saul on the road was private. No, they heard something, but they didn't understand what was going on. That means nobody else could tell anybody else what was said there. You know what I'm saying? In other words, if you consider what Ananias said to Saul, he couldn't have got a heads up from anybody else what happened to Saul on the road, because those somebody else's didn't know what was said. And that tells you then Ananias was getting a direct revelation from God about what Jesus said. And so there's no contradiction. It's just that some heard the sound, heard the voice, but they didn't understand it. And that's all it's meant. Now, you want to add something to that, Carl? There's another passage.
I was going to say, so someone might argue and just say, well, you're just trying to mess with that word. You're saying, it means here, there, but understand here just to fit what you want it to fit. But can we debunk that? Can Scripture debunk that? I think that's where Carl was going to go with Acts 26 possibly there.
Yeah, in Acts 26:14, we're told that the voice that was speaking spoke in Hebrew. So it's a real language. It was not even some mystical or angelic language. He spoke the language that Paul would understand clearly. The men heard that somebody was speaking, but they didn't hear what he was saying. But I do appreciate what you're saying. There was evidence that Paul was receiving some sort of a message. They were witnesses to that event that was overwhelming. What has happened in these texts, and I appreciate you especially bringing out the example with the husband and wife. The Bible speaks to us in language that we understand, just as God was speaking to Paul in Hebrew. There are conventions of language that everybody knows. We try to set that aside when we're dealing with the Bible, sometimes unfairly. Yes, the importance of what's being said is superior. This is a book that's trying to draw us to God. But God is speaking in human terms like we speak. And when he says the men didn't hear, he meant they didn't understand what was being said, not that they didn't hear that a voice was speaking. And it becomes clear when you take the full weight of Scripture that that's exactly what was happening. You put all three of those accounts together, you get a complete eyewitness picture. That's the same thing that ends up happening when you put all the gospel accounts together. One looks like it contradicts the other. Was there one angel or were there two? Well, it depends on whose point of view you're looking from. Sometimes I'll illustrate it this way. If I'm walking down the street and I run into a friend and he asks me what I had for breakfast, and I know he likes bacon, I might tell him I had bacon for breakfast. What if I see another friend a little bit later and I know he likes pancakes and I tell him I had pancakes for breakfast? To which one of them did I lie? Turns out I had pancakes and bacon for breakfast. I'm not telling the whole story, because from the point of view of the person who's talking with me, there's something that's more important: the bacon for the one guy and the pancakes for the other. In the terms of the gospel, the way they're telling the story depends on their audience. It's not that they're intentionally leaving out important information, but their audience would be interested in a certain aspect, and that's what they revealed. In the case of the book of Acts, Luke gives us a narrative of what happened, and then Paul fleshes it out 2 other times when he's telling 2 different audiences what happened. And the full explanation becomes clear when you have all of those texts together.
But they didn't understand what was being said. They heard the voice, they heard the sound, but they didn't understand it. I don't know why they wouldn't have understand it. It just says that they didn't. That's enough for me, and enough to prove the point. It is not a contradiction. Very good, guys.
I think this is one of those that you need all 3 accounts to dismiss the contradiction, but it's an unfair contradiction, because we wouldn't consider that someone's being contradictory in just natural speech if someone had said these things this way. Again,
Right.
we understand that the Bible is a higher standard, so we try to hold it to a higher standard. Well, let's not be unfair. If there is a simple understanding of these contradictions that makes them not a contradiction, then it's not a contradiction. I'm not saying we just dismiss them. I think we need to be honest about this, but
That's
so do
right.
those who are over-examining as well. Be honest. If this is one that really is not a contradiction, then let it go and find another. Go seek for another.
Yeah, and we'll do in another program coming up. We'll do again another one. And if anyone in the audience wants to bring us to our attention things that they've discovered that appear to be so-called contradictions, let us know. Let us know.
Yeah, thank you so much for questing with us this evening. We're prayerful these are encouraging and helpful for you. If you do have questions or comments, please do reach out. We'd be glad to hear from you. We'll respond, and we'll examine whatever contradictions you may bring before us as well. We want to do this as we are seeking for truth. We encourage you to do the same. Good night, guys. I appreciate your time tonight.